Good evening, everyone. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. I hope you're all well and coping okay with lockdown version 2. It was announced earlier this week that Boris Johnson will be putting an end to the lockdown, which is great news, going back into the tier system. Hopefully this continues through to the festive period, so we all get the opportunity to see family over that time and even potentially some friends as well. First of all, just wanted to make you all aware that tonight's talk is not going to be a general overview focused on IR35 legislation and law. It's actually going to be an introduction of a tried and tested solution that we have got and we've been using with a number of contractors in order to be able to support them in doing a thorough IR35 status review of their contract engagement and times used to influence clients as to this is the correct way for them to engage and allowing them to continue operating lawfully outside IR35. Now, I'm sure everyone that's joining us tonight are already seasoned contractors, have been operating as PSCs or through a limited company for a number of years and even decades, some of you. And during those times, you have been self-determining as to whether or not your contract engagements with clients are falling inside, outside IR35. Now, with the reform coming into effect in the private sector as of April next year, it will be the responsibility of your clients in determining whether or not these contract engagements fall inside or outside IR35. And often those clients are quite uneducated, don't truly understand IR35, and as a result are given incorrect determinations, and sometimes you're being pushed or even forced to engage with them via an inside determination. Now, being a PSC and operating through a limited company, as a self-employed individual, has a number of risks as it is anyway. Things like you have no notice periods on the contracts that you're engaging with. Often you're not sure when one contract is going to finish and the next contract is going to start as well. So then be told that you're then going to lose the benefits that you have of operating through a PSC and through your limited company must be really, really frustrating for you as an individual. And if you were forced to engage with individuals on a inside basis, also means that you might be forced to freeze your limited company as well, which isn't a great position to be in. On top of this, if you're then having to engage on a contract that is inside, it means you are then having to pay tax in line with that of a permanent employee, but not receive any of the benefits that a permanent employee gets, such as holiday pay and sick pay. So it is a real annoyance for individuals, and we certainly feel your pain over here. The last thing I want to mention before we get into the talk today, we've had such a good response from individuals wanting to jump on the webinar today that we have decided not to do a live Q&A session at the end, mainly because IR35 is very specific to each and every contract engagement. So we felt, as opposed to giving different information to lots of different people and not being able to answer all the questions at the end, we will be sending out a link to people which will have the option to book in some time one-to-one, with myself or one of the individuals at Woodrow Mercer Solutions to discuss any questions you might have, or if you currently are engaged on a contract or due to engage in a contract and you would like us to put you through the review process, then we'll be able to do that with you on a one-to-one basis. However, we have got some individuals that are going to be on the keyboard. So if you have got any questions, feel free, please, to put them in the live text. And one of the individuals will try and respond to those as we are going through the webinar. So just to give an overview of what we're going to be talking about today. First of all, we are going to give an introduction as to who Woodrow Mercer Solutions is and where the development and evolution of our IR35 solution has come from. Next, we'll talk a little bit about how the private sector reacted early this year when IR35 was meant to be introduced, but was delayed due to the pandemic. Then we will give an overview of our review tool itself and discuss our solution as a whole and what will be involved in the process from start to finish. And finally, we'll be talking about the benefits to you and your PSC of engaging with us and doing a review of around IR35. And then finally, the benefits that also would be to the clients that you are engaging with. So, Woodrow Mercer Solutions are an IT consultancy. We are the sister company of a recruitment agency who have existed since January 2012, and they recruit extensively across technology markets, learning and development and e-learning markets, finance, and then also healthcare as well. We started to do more IT consultancy, working via an associate model, pairing up with other small consultancies and subject matter experts in order to be able to deliver IT solutions. And the reason this was born was due to us successfully tendering for the likes of the G Cloud framework and also already existing on the CCS frameworks as well. So the reason that the solution came about is we were concerned that a number of the contractors we had, around about 150 at the time, were at risk of potentially having their contracts cancelled or even their engagements being reviewed inaccurately with regards to IR35. And this again is coming back to the point that it's quite unfair to contractors, mainly because the law around IR35 itself hasn't changed since it was introduced in the year 2000. The only thing that has changed is the responsibility of who must make the status determination has switched from the PSC onto the client. So we started to look into different ways that we were able to support our contractors in ensuring that an appropriate and thorough review was done. And this led us to develop a partnership with a company called Kingsbridge, who are subject matter experts on the matter and also provide insurance as well. So what we then started to do with all the current contract engagements we had, we put them through the review process, producing a status determination statement, which we then shared with the clients, and they were happy with the outcome, and we were able to allow these contractors to continue engaging lawfully outside of IR35. The next thing we then noticed was a lot of these customers that we were working with then started to ask us whether they could put other contract engagements they had through our solution as well, because they didn't have the knowledge, understanding, workforce or time to be able to go through the administrative work that takes in order to do a full review, which of course we're happy to do. On the other side of things, we also noticed that some of the contractors that we had engaged with, when they were moving on to their next piece of work, with a client that wasn't supported in being resourced by Woodrow Mercer Recruitment, they again were having concerns as to the review that the client they were working with was doing with regards to IR35, and asked us whether we could do a review on their behalf, which we did do as well. And this has then led to us being able to offer our IR35 solution both as a complete outsourced outsourced service to some of the clients that we're working with, but also to support PSCs, limited company contractors, in making sure that a thorough review has been done when they are engaging with their clients as well. So how are the private sector reacting before the delay earlier this year? We saw a lot of last minute jerk reactions defining all PSCs engagements as inside IR35. So this was mainly due to a lot of organisations out there not being educated, not truly understanding IR35, and they thought it was safer just to blanket put all of their engagements with PSCs as inside IR35, as this would remove their risk of having an incorrect outside determination. However, this actually puts an organisation just as much at risk as incorrectly defining a status as outside when it should have been inside. The reason being is if it was to be investigated by HMRC, they would consider that no reasonable care has been taken into reviewing each and every single contract engagement. And therefore, if it should have been outside and they've actually defined someone as being inside, then that has been an incorrect determination. It's not fair to the contractor, and they're at risk of the same amount of financial penalties, tax arrears and interest they would be as if it had been the other way around. They defined a role as being outside when it should have been inside as well. We also have seen a lot of organisations doing internal reviews using the HMRC CEST tool, and some organisations have been doing this very well, and some organisations maybe haven't been doing this quite as well. Now, there is a website called offpayroll.org.uk, which is, I suppose, a bit like a TripAdvisor for contractors, where they give feedback on how they feel organisations are responding and reviewing IR35. And it's a good chance for you to review a client you might be going to work with as to whether or not they have been responding well to IR35 or not. The other problems with organisations using the HMRC CEST tool internally is often the individual that then is responsible for conducting the review might not actually be heavily involved in the contract itself, so may answer some of the questions incorrectly. It might also be that the answers can be quite manipulated in order to push it towards an inside or an outside determination, which later on then can come back to bite them should they be investigated by HMRC. In fact, last year the NHS was given a tax bill that was 4.3 million, and this was due to penalties, tax arrears, and interest, mainly because they had been doing general overview blanket assessments of roles as opposed to reviewing each and every single contract engagement. And HMRC felt that they hadn't taken reasonable care into each of their engagements when using HMRC CEST tool and hadn't been responding completely accurately to every single engagement. So the final problem as well with the HMRC CEST tool is it's not without its flaws. It's not the most straightforward tool to be able to use, and actually 15% of the time it doesn't actually give an IR35 status. It reports it as an unknown status, and so it gives you no advice or guidance on how to follow up afterwards. And this is one of the key points of the solution or the tool that we've got that we're going to be discussing later on today that really sets ourselves apart from the HMRC CEST tool. Some organisations, mainly you probably have seen, larger organisations, enterprise organisations, and particularly a lot of banks have been doing a blanket ban on engaging with PSCs. Now, this is actually a bit of a loophole at the moment, because if an organisation has their own policy where they do not engage with PSCs and they will only engage with individuals via umbrella PAYE solutions, then it's not their responsibility to have to do IR35 status reviews. With some of these organisations, we can help you in terms of making sure that you have done a review, but we can't guarantee that we will be able to influence decision with these organisations. At the moment, they're quite set in their ways in terms of doing this. Now, the only problem, I suppose, with these organisations at the moment, they haven't really felt the effects. However, long term, what they will see is they will see an increase in contractors' rates in order to be able to accommodate for the financial loss they would have been made to switch from engaging via their limited company on outside determination and instead having to use a PAYE umbrella solution. I think typically it's sort of 29% worse financially off, so that's the increase that they look to make. The other thing that will happen is over time, and more organisations start to review contracts fairly and allow contractors to continue engaging lawfully outside IR35. These are the ones that will be most desirable for contractors, and over time, these organisations will start to lose out on their talent pool. The final solution, a lot of some customers were doing is they would engage with third-party SMEs using solutions such as the one that we've put together, where they outsource all of the review, pass on the administrative work to another organisation, just to make things a bit easier and smoother for themselves. So next, I'm going to talk to you about our review process, but also give you a bit of an oversight and a look into the tool that is used in order to review and determine your IR35 status. So we would typically conduct this review with the contractor first, mainly because you're the individual who has been delivering this work and been doing this work for so many years, and you know how you intend to engage with these contractors. So we'd like to get your opinion and your input to that contract engagement first. Now, the other area that we always make sure that we do to try and set ourselves apart from other solutions out there is we involve both the PSC and the client in every single review. And the reason we do this is to make sure that there's no discrepancies, there's no manipulation of the tool. Everything's really open and honest in terms of the way that they're engaging, which means that the advice we give in terms of contract amendments is going to be good advice and lawful advice that isn't going to put anyone in the chain at risk. So just going to bring up the tool itself. Bear with me 1 second. Okay, excellent. Hopefully everyone can see this. So this is an overview of of what an engagement would look like. So what we would do is we would have the details of the individual, but more importantly, the actual limited company that's going to be delivering the service. We would put in the dates of when the engagement is supposed to start and to finish, and the rate as well. And the reason we have this information that's important is this is later on helps to give an overview of what the financial exposure could be for the client if they weren't to follow an IR35 review sort of appropriately and give the correct determination. As mentioned, as often as possible, ideally every time, we like to go through the questions with the PSC, with the contractor ourselves, just to make sure we can answer any misinterpretations, or if they don't understand a particular question, we can go into a bit more detail with them on them. There might be times when we can't get timing together, particularly if a contract is turning around particularly quickly, where the contractor would then complete those questions on their behalf. And again, as I mentioned before, what we would always do is we would have someone involved from the client side who would have to review the status determination report that we put together and the status determination statement before signing off with the engagement to be able to move forwards. The way the tool is developed is that there's usually yes or no questions, and sometimes there might be an unknown slot as well. And this could be perhaps if you're not entirely sure what the setup is going to be from the client side of things. And if there is ever an unknown, what we have is we have a next phase that I'll be talking about a little bit later on, where we go into more of a consultancy phase, and that's when we can get the input from the client side as well. Now, the tool is also set up that if at any point you would respond to a question that would automatically make your position 100% inside IR35, such as the first question here, that if you are involved in terms of becoming a board member, then you straight away you automatically will fall inside as IR35. I'm going to show you that just for the purpose of, so we can show you what the next level is. So there would be a lot more questions to be able to go through, but however, because the response to my first question here is that I am being a company board member of the client that I'm working for, it means then that the position would fall inside IR35. So afterwards then, with this position, based on the length of the engagement and the rate that I am charging for this position, and because the role is inside IR35, there's no further questions. We cannot influence or change that way if you are going to be working as a board member, but the potential financial exposure to the client for a misinterpretation of this position would be 15,574. I'm not going to go into any further more in-depth detail about what the question is, because this is the sort of process that we would look to go through with the PSCs and with your limited company contractors when you are going to be engaging with the client yourself and you're looking for that support. But as mentioned earlier, following this call, there will be the opportunity for people to book time in with us. If you are currently engaging with clients and your contract is going to run past April next year, or if you're in the process of agreeing a new contract and it's going to run past April next year, and you are concerned about how the IR35 review has been doing, then this is where we're more than happy to go through the full process of answering every question on the sheet with you. Excellent. Just going to bring us back onto the presentation. You can bear with me 1 second. Excellent. So back onto the IR35 review. So as mentioned, we'll go through that process and we'll go for that questions. Typically, we would look it would last, sorry, about 10-15 minutes from the questions, and then we would move on to the next phase. So, next phase. So, following the completion of doing our review, we don't just define a status, but we pinpoint it on a sliding scale, ranging from inside to outside. And this is what our solution offers that others on the market don't currently at the moment. As previously mentioned, the HMRC CEST tool, 15% of the time for those individuals that are falling in a grey area or borderline between inside or outside IR35, it reports it back as unknown. Whereas you can see from the way that we report it is we tell you exactly whereabouts you fall in that range between inside and outside IR35. And the reason this is so beneficial and useful to PSCs and the clients that you're engaging with is because it means it gives us the opportunity to follow up with some additional consultancy and do a further review when positions are falling in that borderline area, in order to be able to potentially provide some advice and guidance on how to amend the contract in order to be able to push that to more of an outside determination. Or indeed, if following that consultation phase, it might be that this position, unfortunately, the way you are engaging is falling inside R35. And at that point, then, the advice we would give is suggest on the appropriate means to engage with on that contract, which would be paying tax at source of payment. So a borderline consultation. What would happen next is one of our IR35 law subject matter experts will ask follow-up questions to any of your original responses, which led to the review receiving a borderline status. For an example, one here is, in the event of incompetence and suitability or professional conduct, what would the contractor be expected to provide a replacement or alternative individual, which is one of the main driving factors in terms of a position being determined as inside or outside. If you weren't able to deliver the work, would the client expect you to provide someone in replacement for that position? So one of our IR35 SMEs wants to have a bit more clarity on why they wouldn't be expected to be able to deliver that service. Could this be due to perhaps the position was DV cleared, and that the person to be able to, in order to be able to have a replacement, isn't feasible because of the type of work that you are doing? Or is it that itself because the engagement is tied specifically to you personally, and only you personally can be able to deliver that work? And this consultation phase may go back and forth, 2, 3, 4 questions, and typically we try to get initial responses back within 24 hours, but often can be a lot quicker on that sort of area. Following this consultation phase, a definitive IR35 status will be given. So we would then come back to no longer having a borderline result. It would be pushed more towards the inside or the outside area, and we would make suggestions to both the PSC and the client on how the contract wording needs to be amended, and also the contract engagement needs to be amended in order to strengthen that determination being towards one side or the other. We then put together a detailed report giving an overview as to whether or not each IR35 measurable of the contract engagement is positive towards an outside status determination or not. And there's the responses which report action required are those which tend to lean towards more of an engagement being as inside and not outside. And sometimes the suggestion can be very small in terms of how to amend the contract. For example, if you look at the first question here, is the contractor name specifically on the contract? And if you were to name the individual personally, and that's suggesting more of an employment agreement. In order to make it a true supplier engagement, then the name that should be referred to throughout the contract should be that of the limited company and of the PSC, as opposed to the individual. So it's a very small amendment we can suggest, which, if needs be, could put a position that a little bit more towards being an outside determination. However, as you can see from the top here, based on the assessment results, this engagement that we reviewed here was quite strongly falling into outside IR35. So changes not here aren't essential, but we would always advise them, because the stronger that determination, then the better of a position it's putting yourself in terms of against any potential financial exposure of your clients. It's at this reporting stage where we now start to get your client involved, or the client that you're going to be delivering the service to involved. And we get then to review the report that we got, just to make sure they agree with all the responses that has been put into it. If there was any discrepancies or disagreements, then we would make sure both sides are involved in terms of the discussion and amendments of that engagement, just to make sure that everyone was on the same page, and there's been no manipulation of the tool itself in order to be able to get the outcome that people are looking for. The next thing we then do is we produce a status determination statement, and this is used to define an engagement as to whether or not it falls inside or outside IR35, and concluding on all the reasons which led towards this decision. This will be provided to every company or organisation that's involved in the chain, and is evidence that reasonable care has been taken in the review of this contract engagement. So the final part we do as part of our solution is also to indemnify the contract engagement. And we do this to put a second layer of protection, which will cover everyone involved in the supply chain, every part in the supply chain, up to £100,000 worth of legal fees and £100,000 worth of a tax arrears and financial penalties. And this is for every single contract engagement. At this point, we are that confident in the diligence that we have gone through in doing this review, that we would never have the need to be able to use this insurance policy. I suppose the way you could view it a little bit is like holiday insurance. Whenever you go on holiday, it's very, very important to have that holiday insurance, but the likelihood of you having to use it is quite slim. But it's better to have it in place should you ever need it, than not have it in place as well. And this is one of the benefits that I suppose is a selling point towards the clients that you're engaging with. By us putting this insurance in place, not only have we now done all the administrative work involved in doing a status review and provided them with a status determination, which is the evidence that a thorough review and reasonable care has been taken in doing that review. It now also mitigates their risk, because if for some reason there ever was to be an investigation, then they would be covered in terms of legal fees. And if it was ever to get to that stage of tax arrears and financial penalties, they would also be covered for that as well. And if I just flick you back to see what the financial exposure is, for this contract here, you can see is running for 6 months at £700 a day, and the financial exposure is 31,000. So to be pushing yourself up to that £100,000, you'd be having to be looking at engaging on £1,000 a day for close to a year. Any more than that then is the only time that you would put yourself at financial risk that would fall outside of the indemnification that we are offering. So to discuss the benefits of our solution to you as limited company contractors and PSCs, first of all, it is a cost-effective solution. Typically, the cost of this is completely covered by the client itself. It is very rare that we have had any charges coming from the contractors. The only situations we've had that is when a contractor or a PSC has felt it's going to be more cost effective for them to contribute towards the cost of the solution, to influence the client to go down that route, compared to them having to engage down an umbrella PAY solution. But in terms of the initial review that we do with you and going through the actual process, that is, of course, is free of charge. It's only during the engagement is at the point when we would look to charge one of your clients. We will conduct a thorough IR35 review with you and produce a comprehensive status determination statement. So, compared to the use of things like the HMRC CEST tool, you are always going to be guaranteed to get a definitive statement, status determination as being inside or outside, and then also we will produce the documentation or the evidence to prove that a formal review has been conducted with reasonable care. We will be able to advise where appropriate and of course lawful on how to amend your contract engagements and working practices to fall in line with IR35 legislation. So it might be slight amendments in terms of advising you on how to engage using statements of work, as opposed to classic contracts that you might be engaging with on your or previously engaged with your clients. We can also consult and educate your clients around IR35, which again, in the first instance, we always offer as a free service. And this is a good way, I suppose, to support and influence them to be more open-minded as to reviewing engagements appropriately and being able to continue engaging with individuals via outside determinations rather than following suit with some of the previously mentioned responses that the private sector was doing earlier this year, in terms of blanket inside determinations or banning on engagements with PSCs. The ultimate aim, I suppose, for us is to enable you as individuals to continue operating through your limited companies as you have done historically and lawfully outside IR35. Benefits of our solution to your clients then. So this can be some of the points, I suppose, when you are speaking with your clients and wanting to be supported in terms of having our reviewing process, when engaging with them with regards to IR35, is that it removes the administrative work involved in doing reviews and guarantees a definitive IR35 status determination. So, a lot of customers and clients at the moment, they haven't got the internal staff, time, knowledge, experience to be able to do an appropriate review. So having someone, take on this responsibility completely can be highly desirable for them. It removes their liability as Woodrow Mercer Solutions takes on the responsibility of the fee payer and the responsibility of ensuring the appropriate tax is paid lies with the fee payer, which would be us, Woodrow Mercer Solutions. It mitigates their risk by indemnifying the outside determination engagement. So as mentioned earlier, we cover all outside determinations up to £100,000 worth of legal fees and £100,000 worth of potential tax arrears and penalties in the unlikely case that we were to be investigated, and then even more unlikely case were to lose a case against them, should it go to court. Finally, they also will have access to IR35 consultancy, and which would, in the first instance, would be free. But then, if they were interested in, internal training, this is a service that we also offer as well. So that does conclude the presentation and the talk for today. I hope that's been useful and informative to people. And as I mentioned at the start of the talk today, if people are looking for more information, general information around IR35, we will be sending out some additional information following the conclusion of the chat and the webinar today. The main point we're hoping to sort of get across to sort of contractors at the moment is that we want to do what we can in able to support you, to allow you to continue operating lawfully outside IR35 if that is the case. Now, you do have to remember that from time to time, there might be a particular contract engagement that is being reviewed by us, and if a position does happen to fall inside IR35, and it is quite strongly, then the advice that we would give would be to seek a payment solution whereby tax is paid at source, and this typically would be a PAYE umbrella solution. Everything that we do in terms of the advice and the guidance we always do to the book. We wouldn't want to put either a candidate, a contractor, PSC, or a client at potential financial risk. I hope it's been sort of useful today. And as I mentioned, if individuals that have been on the talk today are currently engaging with a contract that is going to run past April next year, and they would be interested in having some support and going through our review process, or if between now and any time in the future up to April and post April as well, you engage with a new contract and IR35 hasn't been mentioned, and it's something you would like some support in terms of undergoing a review from, then again, we're happy to put the time in and take you through the process. We will be following up with a link to a Calendly where you'll be able to book some time in with myself or someone else on the team. We also then include an email address, so if there's just any general inquiries, not looking at the moment to go through sort of the process, but you've got some of the questions, concerns, whatever they may be, then feel free to fire those over to us via email, and we'll come back to you as soon as possible. I hope you've all found it useful, and as I said, hopefully the more we move into next year, we can start to put the pandemic behind us, the contract and just general employment market will start to pick up for everyone again. And hopefully then as time goes by, more and more organisations will be educated and get a good understanding of IR35 and follow it as per the legislation is set out, and don't sort of go down the route of sort of blanket bans on PSCs. Thanks for your time, and I hope to speak to some of you again soon. All the best.